Musaka. What if I told you that the difference between the broke and the wealthy isn't talent, luck, or connections? It's 20 minutes most people are too comfortable to claim. Stay with me, because this story is about a man who had nothing, discovered a secret hiding in the dark before sunrise, and used it to build a fortune. By the end of this, you might never look at your alarm clock the same way again. Music. In an age of kings and castles, most men slept until the sun forced them awake. They believed rest was the only prize a hard life could offer. This is the tale of one such man. His name was Everard. He had nothing. He was exhausted, and he was invisible to the world, music. But he stumbled upon a secret buried in the darkness before dawn, a secret that needed no magic, no luck. It only demanded that he rise while the rest of the world stayed asleep. This is how the 5 a.m. habit rewrote his destiny forever. Everard lived in a cramped hut on the outskirts of a busy market town. Every night he fell asleep hungry. Every morning he woke up empty-handed. He hauled loads for merchants and mucked out stables, but the coins barely covered a single loaf of bread. He watched the wealthy men of the town, dressed in fine wool, feasting on meat, and he asked himself, what do they have that I don't? Are they smarter? Are they luckier? He was clever. He was strong, but he felt trapped. Music. He believed his poverty was written into the stars, that he was doomed to struggle forever. The worst part wasn't the hunger, it was the silence, the feeling of being invisible, a shadow drifting through his own life. One evening, an old merchant stopped near his hut. His cart had a broken wheel. Everard helped him repair it, and the merchant offered him food and a seat by the fire. As they sat there, the old man didn't talk about luck or fate. Music. He talked about time. Boy, he said, the sky gives the same daylight to the king and the peasant, but the man who claims the darkness before the sun rises, that man lives his day twice. Everard didn't understand. What good is the dark? He asked. The old man only smiled and drifted off to sleep, but Everard couldn't sleep. The words kept circling in his mind. He decided to test the riddle. That night, he went to bed early, uneasy, afraid of the cold, afraid of the dark, but more afraid of never changing. Before the rooster crowed, before the first bird sang, while the moon still hung high, music, Everard opened his eyes. It was cold. It was dark. Every part of him wanted to stay under his thin blanket, but he forced himself up and stepped outside. The village looked like a ghost town. No merchants, no noise, no one watching. For the first time in years, he felt free. Music. He walked to the river, splashed cold water on his face, and simply sat there, watching the current, thinking. He wandered to the empty market, studied the stalls, the scattered trash, the wood needing repair. In that quiet, his mind worked differently. He noticed things the daytime chaos always hid. He began to see opportunity. Then the sun climbed higher, and for the first time he didn't feel like a beggar staring at the wealthy. He felt like a man witnessing his own world take shape. He hurried home, remembered a cracked axe head in the corner, and a small idea took hold. That first morning, he wasn't chasing riches. He just sharpened his old battered axe and made it useful again. While other men shuffled off for breakfast, Everard slipped into the forest. He'd already logged 2 hours of work before they'd even opened their eyes. Music. He split wood for himself, stacked it neatly, and by midday had a pile ready to sell. He hauled it to the market while the other vendors were still setting up. A woman needed fuel for her oven and bought his entire pile. It wasn't much, but it was money earned by his own hands. Music. With those coins, he bought real meat and savored every bite, realizing he hadn't just fed himself, he'd earned back his dignity. That night, he carved a mark into his wall and promised himself he'd repeat it tomorrow, no matter what. The next morning was tougher. His muscles ached, the cold cut deeper, but he remembered the taste of that meat and got up anyway. Music. He chopped wood every single morning through rain and frost, becoming a phantom of the forest while everyone else dreamed. He saved his coins, bought a sharper axe, worked faster, saved more, bought a second axe. Realizing one man couldn't clear the forest alone, he found a boy as poor as he'd once been and paid him to help. Music. With 2 axes swinging, the pile doubled. Everard no longer just sold wood, he sold more than anyone else in the market. Merchants began seeking him out instead of waiting on slower vendors. Everard had the supply. He had the leverage. He was no longer invisible. Music. People learned his name and respected him, but Everard understood the real secret. They weren't respecting him. They were respecting the man who chose to rise early. His hut was growing too small for his ambitions. Coins jingled in his pocket, but he wasn't wealthy yet. He was merely comfortable, and comfortable wasn't enough. He looked past the forest to a town 2 days' journey away, one with no trees of its own, a town that paid triple for firewood. Music. He hired strong men, offering to pay above the going rate, and put together a caravan of timber-loaded carts. The journey was long and risky, but when he arrived, the freezing town greeted him warmly. His wood was worth its weight in gold. Music. He sold the entire caravan by morning's end and came home with more wealth than he'd ever seen in his life. But he didn't stop there. He poured it all back in, building a warehouse to keep the wood dry, buying more axes, hiring more men. Now, when Everard rose at 5 a.m., he wasn't alone. His men rose with him. He'd built a culture of discipline, music. He stopped swinging an axe himself. His role had shifted to thinking, planning, and scouting new markets all before sunrise. He moved his mother into a stone house with a real hearth. She wept, saying she never imagined she'd feel warmth like this again. Music. Yet every morning at 5 a.m., Everard still stood at his window, gazing at the same dark village, remembering the old merchant's words, "The man who claims the darkness lives his day twice." Years later, the old merchant returned to find not a struggling peasant, but a prosperous trader. Everard bowed before him. "You gave me the riddle," he said. "You changed my life." Music. The old man simply smiled. "I only gave you words. You gave yourself the discipline." Everard thought back to his childhood, to loving the sunrise as a boy before somehow learning to sleep right through it. He realized the sunrise had never changed. The world hadn't changed. Music. He had changed. He stopped treating the early morning as a burden and began treating it as a gift. The wood itself was just wood, but the life he'd built came from hours no one else wanted. Music. He passed the lesson to his apprentices. The first hour belongs to you. No merchants, no debts, no problems, just you and your thoughts. While others slept, his men made plans. While others complained about the cold, his men had already lit the fire. Success was never about being the smartest. It was about starting the soonest, about using the silence to find clarity before the noise of the day swallowed it whole. Music. He watched his rivals wake up late, rush through their mornings, and make careless mistakes. They were always reacting to the day. Everard was always shaping it. The river where he'd first washed his face became his refuge, a place he returned to not to labor, but to sit and feel grateful. Music. He looked at his reflection and no longer saw the broke boy. He saw a man of substance, a man of his own making. The village would wake, stretch, and begin its day of labor, but Everard had already lived a full morning by then. The wealth kept growing, not from luck, but from the compound effect of thousands of early mornings, small wins stacking into a fortune. Music. Everard became the richest man in the region, not because he was a genius, but because he'd mastered the one resource most men waste, the early morning. As an old man, Everard sat by the fire when his grandchildren asked, "Grandfather, what's the secret to a good life?" He pointed toward the window where the world was still dark. Music. "Do you see that? That's where I found everything I ever wanted." "But it's dark and scary," one boy said. Everard laughed. The dark is only frightening if you have nothing to do in it. Give yourself a purpose, and the dark becomes just a quiet room to build in. He took his eldest grandson to the forest's edge, placed a small, sharp axe in his hands, and said, "Tomorrow, before the sun wakes, meet me at the river." Music. The boy arrived before dawn, shivering, but he showed up. Everard rested a hand on his shoulder. "You've already passed your first test. You showed up. The rest comes easy." The grandson carried the habit forward, found success of his own, and passed the lesson to his children. Music. The habit traveled through generations. The village raised a monument to the old merchant who'd given the riddle, but truly it honored an idea that time, once seized, is worth more than gold. And so the tale of the broke man who became wealthy turned into legend. But it was never magic. It was a choice made every single day in the dark before the world had a chance to tell him he couldn't. Music. Everard's world is long gone, but the principle endures. The world is loud. The world is full of distraction. But for a few hours each morning, it goes quiet. The question isn't whether you have talent. The question isn't whether you're lucky. The question is, what will you do with the silence? If this story moved you, if you want to build a destiny of your own, subscribe to Faith with Dan. Music. We bring you stories of strength every week. Tell us in the comments, what time do you wake up? Are you claiming the darkness? Share your goals with us, and we want to hear your story. Watch one of these videos next to keep going on your journey. Music. Remember, the world can wait. Your destiny starts now. We'll see you in the next story. Faith with Dan. Rise early, rise strong.